The heralds of government, and I would like to propose an argument that the COVID pandemic has definitely confirmed the need to abandon traditional objectivity in media. I know that this thesis is strict, but I will try to argue why I think so. And my presentation is going to be based on my working analysis of Czech public television broadcast, Czech TV. I have several basic assumptions of my argument. The first is that I believe that the pandemic has its global causes like mobility, travel industry, international business, and so on, which means for me that it is not only a health crisis, but it's also a crisis of late modern global society. And the causes should be socially recognized. I refer to Ulrich Beck's risk society conception. As well as this global emergency is capable of provoking a radical response with environmental effects. For example, reducing the industry means reducing the pollution, as we know now, but at the same time, it can have some negative consequences. For example, policy can push back important climate solutions. I refer to the discussion of common agriculture policy in the Council of the EU in the last month. Therefore, I think that decisions have to be based on the expert knowledge, but the decision-making process should involve the whole society and should be participative. And that should be so even not only in local, but even in the global context. This is important, especially when the public space is restrained. We have discussed before the beginning of my presentation that we are locked down in many countries. So I think that media are necessary, and especially public service broadcasting, which can bring us the public space we do not have now outside. I will use or employ the notions or the dichotomy of traditional and pragmatic objectivity by Stephen J. Ward. Briefly, traditional objectivity for me means that news is objective when it is factual and accurate record of some event or something. And this means that the main value is to provide informations, eliminating commentary, interpretation, and so on. Pragmatic objectivity, on the other hand, means attaining truth and just judgment, and rather to test the information, test the truth journalists use in their broadcasting or news making. So it doesn't mean just to be just mediator of information from elsewhere, but to be active in the construction of a just and fair reporting. This is this refers, or it is connected to one side of the objectivity. As Stephen J. Ward says that we have, or we can distinguish at least three kinds of objectivity: ontological, epistemic, and procedural. And this procedural objectivity is for me most important because it means that journalists keep fair and reasonable decisions in their practice. The correct decision, fairness, and integration of all voices, even the unheard voices. That's what I mean when I say that it is procedural objectivity. So it doesn't mean like checking the facts and so on, which is more epistemic objectivity. Why I have chosen public service broadcasting, I think that it is clear, but I have several reasons why I did so. The first is that public service broadcasting remains defensible and resisting the profit-oriented mentality, even if the public sphere which public service broadcasting constructs is still some kind of bourgeois sphere. It doesn't include all the all the strata of the society. PSB as well remains defensible and resisting the manipulation of public opinion by political parties and governments. And it asserts a right of access to public life to people and groups which were excluded from the majority. And it asserts the right to hold politicians accountable. I mean, this is the normative basis of the public service broadcasting, as I would like to use it in my presentation. But I will say that it is not so in the case of Czech television this year, or at least in spring. And for the theory and methodology, I need to say that I use critical discourse analysis inspired by Norman Fairclough. So I have focused on communicative event, which were Události, the main news broadcasting. I will present it to you later. So I've analyzed the text, I mean, of Události broadcasting. And then I was also focused on the order of discourse, which means that I have analyzed genres and discourses which were present in the text. So to sum up my method, the main news broadcasting Události is at 7 p.m. every day. It is one of the most viewed part of the broadcasting of the Czech public broadcasting service. And I have selected from March and April 6 texts based on my viewing of all of them, which are representing for me this period, and analyzed them with the special focus on discourses, genres, relationships, and identities, or better to say, identities and relationships between them. I have to say that the data were well saturated in the third or fourth broadcasting. Most of them, the elements were not variated. The analyzed elements were very stable in my data set. I should start with a brief information about the context of discourse practice and social culture practice, because it is very important, especially in the case of Czech television. I don't know how many of you know the context of Czech media today, but to have a brief introduction, Czech television is for a long time under pressure from the side of politicians like Miloš Zeman, our president, from the government parties, especially ANO, with Prime Minister Andrej Babiš is leader of ANO, former businessman, or he is still kind of businessman, but now he's prime minister, and as well from right-wing populists like SPD, but not only these parties. The major problem nowadays is the Czech Television Council, which is a regulational institution of Czech television, and now we experience something like moral majority who tries to control or to take control of the television. It's a complex problem, just for introduction. So I can say that Czech television is very precautionary. They are trying to be neutral, to manifest their objectivity, and they are really under harsh pressure. The other thing is that there are long-term financial problems in Czech TV. I mean, the financial sustainability of Czech television is problematic, and therefore the television experience kind of marketization. I mean, linking to private sector in producing some, especially lifestyle broadcastings or shows. On the other side, I have to say that people in Czech Republic trust the television. It depends on the research, but we can say that about 60 or 50% of people in my country trust the public broadcaster. And albeit the trust is descending during the lockdown, because people were at home and were watching television, the ratings increased. From the side of the social culture practice or social politics, we are experiencing something which can be said that is the erosion of political system, because the traditional political parties do not have the power as it was in last 30-20 years. And we experience as well something like culture wars. I mean, anti-migration and anti-LGBT and so on initiatives, which are putting pressure on television and media and liberal elites. And before I will present you results of my analysis and try to conclude something, I would like to say that the situation in spring, which was for me the topic of my research or my analysis, can be framed by a meeting which was arranged by Andrej Babiš, our prime minister, in March, when he had a meeting with the management of Czech television and two private commercial televisions, TV Nova and TV Prima, and appealed to them to serve the government or just to be neutral and put information and be loyal to the state. This is a screenshot of the main of the show or of the broadcasting, so you can imagine how it is set. I have identified several dominant discourses, which were mostly legal or law, security, economic, logistic, and administrative. There was also a political, politics, like decision-making process discourse, but it was presented only in marginal way, and I will make a brief comment later on this. Therefore, I can say that the public, which was represented, or public issues which were represented by a newsreader, reporter, government, and authorities and experts, was like the objective side, especially in the informative discourse of the newsreaders. And it was translated to private by demonstrating or illustrating how the measures, how the restrictions and the situations is in private, which mean in business, in families, and in hospitals. There were stories about nurses, about medics, and about parents, and so on. But this was the subjective side, which did not translate to public side, like what does follow from the situation in the field or in the reality of the people. No clear boundaries were maintained between representation of the administrative and economic discourse of the government and the journalist speech. That means that the governmental agenda became mixed and indistinguishable from journalism. So that's why I say that the solutions, the measurements, the restrictions, the decision-making process was naturalized and depoliticized. Measures and decisions were objective and necessary, like impersonal. They were using reflexive verbs and so on. And issues and concerns about the situations were privatized or even commodified, like how can we deal with our situation? We should do more innovations, and even the economical discourse was employed, like volunteers are serving the demand for masks and so on. So the vocabulary was like from economics even in the case of volunteers, and even culture problems like problems with theaters and people who work in culture were translated to business and economic language. Well, this is another slide. It's Janhamachik, the interior minister, and it's typical situation. The airplane with masks from China. So this is how identities and relationships between identities were represented in my sample, and I would like just to put emphasis on the fact that the government was the sole active identity, and people were like passive reception of the measurements and restrictions and situation. And they were presented like consumers, patients, volunteers were, active volunteers who helped the government, but they were not involved in the decision-making process. There were no room for discussing what life do we want to live. So I know that I have 15 minutes, so I will conclude. But
you can have a couple of more minutes. Yes, but that's
thank you. You're very kind on me. But I just want to say that the measures and the politics of the government were objectified and detached from the politics. And if there were any representation of politics in Czech Republic, it was like we have consensus, there are no problems, we are all one nation, and politics from opposition and other parties, especially in March, were not present so much in the broadcasting. And I have to say that there was a dichotomy between like us is the Czech nation and they is the Europe, where the politics was the dominant discourse. Like others are failing, their politicians are in conflict, they do not know what to do and so on. But we know what to do, and that's exactly the rhetoric of the government, of Andrej Babiš especially, who said we would like to be like China. And Korea, because they manage it well. So there's a crucial question. What is the life we want to live, and what is the world we would like to live after the pandemics? By replacing the political dimension of the pandemic with economic and administrative discourses, I think that it was suppressed awareness that the decision on how we want to live today and after the pandemic should be a collective decision. Just a quick quote from Jeremy Igers, because I think that he sums up this well. I think as him that public journalism that consists primarily of a conversation between journalists and experts and relegates citizens to secondary role is not likely to engage a disaffected population and produce meaningful answers for our common future. So it's the conclusion from this my working analysis is ethical. It is focused on promoting the change in the thinking about the objectivity, because I understand that Czech television have to be objective in the situation of hard pressures on the television. But this neutral traditional objectivity in fact means that they are backing up the government even when their critics say that they are like the voice of opposition. It is not true. At least it was not true in spring. So not mere facts, not presenting mere facts, but pragmatic objectivity, testing hypotheses, presenting alternatives, and discussing our common future. That's what I think that should change in Czech public broadcasting, because I don't think that it will change in Czech commercial sector. That's all from me, and thank you for the extra minutes.